Hello, welcome. This is a recording by Michelle Honey, that's me, and I'm going to be talking today to Diane Skiba as part of a project called Nursing Informatics Development, Implementation and Evaluation over 5 decades. So I'll be asking Diane for her personal accounts and experiences. So I'll just move over to Diane now. Diane, thank you for joining me today and welcome.
Nice to see you today. Thank you for inviting me.
Look, Diane, can I just start with the first question? I know you've been involved with nursing informatics for quite a while, but could you just briefly describe the journey that you have had in informatics?
You know, when I was in graduate school, I did a lot of mainframe computer applications for statistical analyses. And when I finished up my PhD, my graduation present was an Apple II. And I thought I died and went to heaven to see what I could do on a personal computer. And it was one of those easy to use, you know, it was called the computer for the rest of us, which I thought was very rewarding. So when I got my machine, I decided I should look into and see how it's being used in healthcare. And I taught in a school of nursing. And so besides statistics, what else could we do with the computer? I ended up going to a conference at the National Institutes of Health down in Washington, D.C. And I met Virginia Saba at that conference, who of course took me under her wing and said, okay, this is what you got to do. If you want to know more about this, come to the Symposium on Computer Applications in Medical Care, SCAMPSI as it was known then, which is now IMIA, to this meeting, because it'll be the first time nurses will be presenting about how they use technology in healthcare. So I went there and I met other people, and it's really how I got my beginning.
Wow. So I know you've been very involved in academia. Is it other areas of informatics or other aspects of academia that you've been involved in?
I've done mostly academic, but in many of our institutions, like at the University of Colorado, we are highly connected with our healthcare system. So I've had my share of sitting on committees for EHR selections for this, for that, and the other things. So I have sat on a lot of committees, but I've primarily focused on teaching informatics.
Right. So I know you've already mentioned Virginia Saba. Are there any others who have been people who have inspired and mentored you as part of this journey in informatics that you've had?
Well, Virginia was definitely the first person I met, and she was very gracious to take me under her wing. And she really helped me to not only connect when I was at conferences, she would introduce me to people. She got me publishing. She asked me to write a chapter in her book, and she really cemented my career in terms of pathways. And she insisted that I go to the first international NI meeting back in Ireland in 1980 something was in the meeting, so that I could get involved with the IMIA-NI group. When I went to the NIH meeting that she told me to go to, I met up with Judy Ronald. And Judy Ronald was a professor at the University of Buffalo. And she started the first nursing informatics course, at that time called Computers in Nursing, in 1976. And upon meeting her, I was able to really have her as my mentor in creating a curriculum and creating a course that I offered in 1982 at Boston University called Computers in Nursing. And last but not least, I was fortunate enough to have a third mentor who was Marion Ball. And Marion really helped me navigate the field as a non-nurse. She's not a nurse and I'm not a nurse. And she gave me good advice and really made the connections and networked with me. And we have been friends since.
That's a wonderful story. Um, and you've obviously, yeah, these people are amazing, aren't they? But
Yes.
so what would you say has been the most rewarding aspect of your work in informatics?
I thought a lot about this, and I think, the most satisfying and the most exciting things is always when I get a note from a student or an email or a card or something that says, oh my God, I got my first job in nursing informatics as an informatics specialist. And they're so excited and just so grateful that they made that transition to come into the field. And that's just been the most rewarding thing. And I still, although I'm retired, get emails back from students saying, oh my God, if I hadn't come to the program and if you hadn't turned me on to nursing informatics, I don't know where I'd be.
That's neat. So I'm sure not everything has gone well. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced?
Probably in the beginning and, thereafter, there's always the naysayers. There's always a group of nurses that, particularly when we were called not nursing informatics, but computers in nursing, who were very adamant that people didn't want nurses to be on computers. They wanted them to provide nursing care. So there was usually a lot of resistance, whether it was faculty or, VPs of nursing or whatever. There's always that little resistance that you have to figure out how to get through. And I got some great advice from my mentors who said, you need to find something that will entice them into using the technology. And so when I first started at Boston University, I got a grant from IBM and they gave me 10 machines, which at that time was a fortune. And I happened to come across a program that was called Micro Cookbook. And it was all built around database and database concepts. So I had the faculty come in and I showed off the lab. And during one of the demonstrations, we showed them how to use Micro Cookbook, where you could search by your ingredients and get recipes and print out your grocery list as well as the recipe. And they kind of got excited. So they kept coming in and saying, oh, I got extra tomatoes this week. What can I make? And, I use those opportunities to then say, well, these are databases. And imagine instead of recipes or ingredients, you're talking about patient data and looking at that patient data. And so I was always trying to figure out, what it is that would entice them to come in and get them hooked on using the computer so that I could meet this challenge. The other thing I got sage advice was, particularly to get a course approved, was to hold a conference. So the associate dean at the time, when I was at Boston University, said, have a conference. If people come from out of state and they think it's important that these people came from all over to hear this conference, then they'll vote for the course. So, we did all the work up for it. I needed 100 people. Of course, by then I knew Marion, I knew Judy, and I knew Virginia, who automatically brought their little tribe with them. So they became all my initial speakers. And I only needed 100 to break even, and we got 364. So the faculty saw this because they came for free to the conference, and they unanimously voted in my first course. So that's how I met those challenges.
It's good things to remember, isn't it?
It is.
So just the final question is, what advice do you have for the next generation of informatics nurses?
I think, I started when we talked about doing these interviews with probably 25 things, and I've kind of narrowed it down to 4. So the first one is find yourself a mentor, somebody who can kind of guide you along and introduce you to people and give you access to their network. And then you can start to build your network. Also, join professional organizations. Look at what's local, look at what's regional, national, and international, and begin to enmesh yourself in these organizations, because you'll then have a body of experts in your network that you can call upon whenever you need advice or if you need somebody to collaborate, etc. I would also advise people to not disregard what's been done in history. We have a long, rich 50-year history in informatics. And I think that what you can do as this next generation is build upon that and expand it and use the newer technologies to really enrich the informatics field and the tools that are being used by both patients and healthcare providers. And lastly, I would highly encourage you to publish. You need to be able to share your ideas and get your ideas out to other people. Not just talking to your network, but you could start small with a newsletter or work your way to a chapter or write a journal article or just do a presentation. But you want to really share your knowledge and what you've been learning in informatics and what you've been testing or researching that should be shared with the community. So we as a discipline can grow.
That's really sage advice and a wonderful place to leave this interview. Diane, thank you so much for sharing the stories and your insights. It's been, really informative. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Michelle.
Bye for now.
Appreciate the opportunity.